in the chat box. Where are you joining from? What's the time right now? So that we get to know a feeling of who's in the room right now, which countries are represented, and exactly at what time of the hour are you giving us this specific time for yourself. Thank you very much. So, welcome to the Manipulative in Mathematics Teaching, Pitfalls and Benefits, and then Evidence from Numeracy at Scale. So, Dr. Wendi will be introducing us and running through the research part as well. But we have some requests before we begin each time. We are really grateful for your presence. We encourage and appreciate undivided attention. So, if you have something switched on, any mobile service, anything else. If it's not urgent, given that this is urgent, and your presence will be fully amazing. So if you can switch it off or put it on silent for a while for this 1.5 hour, 90 minutes, it'll be really great. And as always, your openness have always brought us magic. We will record these sessions as well. We're trying to upload them on a YouTube channel of GSF so that all the recorded sessions around research and every aspect are available, and we continue to learn and share throughout. Before we move ahead, we have this Mentimeter. We have 3 questions. We also, it's a chance for Dr. Wendi and all of us to also get a chance into understanding who's in the room, who has joined in, and what is their experience with mathematics. So if you could go into the barcode, and I will start presenting, so then we'll be able to see that. I'll put it on the chat box as well. Just give me a minute. I'll put the link as well. Sorry about that. Great. I will put the link here. Are you able to enter the barcode through the through the image? I hope you can. And then, Wendy, are you able to enter through the presentation? Yes, perfect. So great. So let me stop sharing this screen and go to the present mode. And let me share the screen again. Great. So have you been involved in math or numeracy interventions? We're getting somewhat and yeses. So if you have other answers, please do pull in. And if you're unable to use the Mentimeter for any reason, please just put your answers in the chat box so we get to understand. We've got 3 responses so far. We'll wait.
There's another yes in the chat.
Great. Great. And put it in your chat box if you are unable to use the Mentimeter. It's not a problem. We just want to get a feeler of how many have been involved in any math intervention in your context or prior experience. Great. We're getting answers in the chat box as well. So a lot of people have experienced intervention with mathematics. Let me move to the next slide then. Okay. Have you been involved? And then we've got that. Yeah, perfect. This question is, how would you rate yourself in terms of knowledge on math instruction? Again, the same. If you feel you are unable to access the Mentimeter, please put it on the chat box. But we have a mixed group coming so far. Great, Wendi. It's a great classroom then.
It's very real having a mixed experience of students.
It's wonderful because that's all manipulatives comes about to, right? It's playing with very different learning levels. So great. We have strong command, we have some familiarity, we can have group learning today. That's great. Ready to move to the last question. And this one is, if you had to write a one word and share your reflection when you were a student in a math classroom. I remember I tried to not be in the classroom.
I may give myself away with my response.
We have a bunch of very passionate, enthusiastic people, yeah.
But I understand the difficult to understand and frustrating. I've certainly seen a lot of students who felt that way.
Great. We have motivated, curious, limited support. I think that's really, really common also as an experience, feeling that I don't have the support system. Quickly bored. Fear. It's quite an interesting mixture always, right? Great. Lovely answers to keep in mind. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. This gives us a good starting point of what always a mathematics class looks like. Let me go into our slide deck. Thank you for responding to these questions. And thank you, everyone who's joining in and coming in. Our About GSF, wanted to introduce a bit about that before we dive into it. I'm sure many of you are familiar with and more than familiar with, but overall, we have now increased to, with all the collective support, to 128 organizations, over 60 countries. All of you are collectively impacting over 24.3 million children and a massive number of schools. So this is a great opportunity continuously to learn from each other. Thank you for being a part of this again. And in this comes the communities of practice. Our major goal is honestly to build connections, advance peer learning, strengthen alignment on certain thematic fronts where we feel more alignment is required, including partnering with the government or scaling or different aspects. We're running different communities of practice across, as well as we have focus on contextualization so that while the research, and that's where this research series comes in, whereby we believe there's a lot of valuable research out there. How can we bring it in a synthesized form for all of us to benefit and localize for our own context? Today, we're very excited to have Dr. Wendi Ralaingita. She's a senior education advisor at RTI International. She's currently the primary investigator for the Science of Teaching grant funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, has been a specialist, a technical advisor, travels literally across the globe from one week to another. So it's really an honor. Thank you very much, Dr. Wendi, to join us. And I'm sure you will also have a lot to look forward to learning from this amazing cohort of participants. So yeah, over to you.
Thank you. And I know AJ knows I travel a lot because of trying to get a hold of me. I'm just gonna, share my screen and take it from there. Let's see. Okay. So today I'm going to share a couple sort of pieces of evidence that we've worked with the Science of Teaching. First of all, I'm going to give an overview of findings from the large numeracy at scale study that we undertook, which I think really points to the importance of using manipulatives in math classroom. It gives a general idea of some key instructional strategies, but at the same time really points to why manipulatives are so important. Then I'm going to go into kind of a deep dive on manipulatives, and this is really introducing a materials guidance that we're going to be launching within a couple months that is based on compiling evidence around research, global research on manipulatives, and sort of what are the ways in which manipulatives can support learning, how do they support learning, but also some of the challenges and some of the things that research has shown can actually take away from learning if manipulatives are not used well. And then just before I end, I'm going to talk a little bit more about science of teaching and what we do, some of the resources that we have available. So first, beginning with the Numeracy at Scale study, this was a study that was trying to understand, looking at math interventions that have been successful, shown success at scale, meaning working in an entire country or an entire region, to understand what was it that made them successful and be able to see that impact at scale. Because oftentimes, you start with a small pilot, but when it goes to scale, sometimes the impact is lost. So we were trying to understand what made these programs successful. And you can see the 6 programs shown on the screen that we were included in this study, and we did mixed methods research to look at these 3 questions. The first one was classroom ingredients, particularly math instruction. We looked at training and support and the systems level. And I'm going to hone in on that first question and just share the main themes that we found from under this research question 1, that what we saw teachers in the classrooms in all of these programs doing. So the first thing was using multiple representations. You see an example of this at the bottom of the screen, where talking about place value and comparing numbers using place value. This is an example from the ESMATE program that, the different ways to show the same concept. And that was an important element in all of the programs. The second theme was focusing on understanding, really conceptual understanding. So making sure that the students weren't just learning sort of the steps to solve a problem, but really understanding what was happening in the problem. And they had a number of different ways to approach that, and using manipulatives was one of them. Active student engagement, making sure all kids in the classroom were really getting a chance to practice, not just sort of watching the teacher or watching one student at a time at the board, but really had substantive time on practice, and as well were engaged when the teacher was doing modeling or explanation. And as you can see at the photos to the right, again, manipulatives were a really key tool that was used for student engagement and while students were practicing. The last theme was assessment informed instruction. This was probably the weaker of the themes. We did see in all of the programs the teachers moving around the classroom when the students were working, and helping learners as if they were struggling. And then in some cases, more formal assessments that were used for grouping and such. So those, give an overall of some of the key instructional strategies that really stand out and really connect with other research we've seen on math instruction. And also just, you can see through these why manipulatives are really helpful in the classroom. However, what we also found that just having the materials, like a lot of people are aware that manipulatives in math are useful, right? But how they are used is really key. And in fact, there's research that if they're used inappropriately, they can actually detract from learning. So really focusing on how they're used and making sure they're used appropriately is really important. And to that end, the Science of Teaching has compiled research evidence around what works and using manipulatives, and developed this 2-part guide series. The first part, which says the basics here, that's sort of for a broad audience and really goes into basics about selecting materials and using materials. And then the second part is a much deeper dive that goes into a series of materials and really talks about each of the materials, what they can be used for, their best use, etc. And I'm going to, in the remainder of this presentation, I'm going to go into some of the key points from that first guide on selecting and using materials. I'm going to start with using materials, and one of the key ideas that, to be clear on is this idea of representations. I mentioned it in that first slide on findings from numeracy at scale. Representation is a mathematical concept or idea shown through symbols, through drawings or figures or objects. And as what is showing here is different representations for addition. And again, multiple representations was one of those findings as a key instructional strategy from each of those successful programs. So knowing that there are different representations, there can be different representations for concepts. My first question that I want you all to think about and respond in the chat is, which one of these representations is best for teaching addition and why? So I want to invite you to just put in the chat real quick which of these representations that you feel is the best for, or you think is the best for teaching addition, and maybe a word or two on why. I'm just waiting for some folks to enter into the chat. I don't see anything yet. Okay, thanks. I see a B, A.
It's always courageous to be the first one, right?
Yeah, and I have very good wait time, so. There's a lot of folks saying A. Concrete examples. Okay, I'm going to all three are important. On that note, Deepan, recognize that this was kind of a trick question. Let me get back to because in fact, these are all good representations for addition. And remember, in that slide on best practices, or on the findings from the numeracy at scale, we saw teachers using multiple representations, not just choosing one and that's the only representation and then jumping to symbols. But using multiple representations can really deepen students' understanding of the concept. And also for some students might really get the counters, right? But other students, when you use the fingers, it makes more sense to them. So these multiple representations both deepen their understanding of the concept, but also can help more of the students potentially be able to connect with the concept and really understand and use it. There. So when using manipulatives as representations, teachers should use multiple representations to reinforce the concept and allow for multiple strategies. They need to show the concept. The teacher needs to make sure that the concept is clearly shown through the representation, both when they model and explain, but as well when students are using it, to make sure students are not just going through the motions, but understand the concept. If they don't, this is one of the pitfalls we often see, that the learners see the teachers just as a series of steps with the manipulatives, so they can follow the steps, but still not understand the concept. Just like when the teacher is sort of showing the steps of doing an addition problem that the students may just follow without understanding, the same can happen with manipulatives. And this is an example I saw on a recent visit to Lebanon. They have beautiful fraction circles, right? But the way that they're putting them together doesn't follow any logic, and it gives the idea that the teacher, maybe they saw the teacher putting things together to make a circle, but didn't really understand why. And I don't know if you can see the answers on the paper, but this is the result, is basically once the student sees uncommon denominators, they're not able to do these problems. And that's actually exactly one of the things we try to use the fraction circles for, is to help them understand the relationship between different fractions. So in this case, the use of the manipulatives actually is not helping the students understand the concept, because the teacher did not make sure that concept was clear. Giving learners ample opportunity to use the manipulatives themselves. And many times I've seen classrooms where there's not enough materials. And so the teacher just demonstrates with the materials, or maybe calls 1 or 2 students to demonstrate. But in fact, that's not going to help the students really get understand the concepts. It's using them themselves, getting that practice in with the materials, which can be in a group instead of individually if there are not enough materials for all students, but just the teacher demonstrating is not going to do very much for helping the students to understand. And then making sure that learners move from concrete or pictorial to abstract. This is an example we saw in Kenya when we were piloting our tools, where a learner, you can see they're doing this double-digit addition, still using hatch marks, which is a great thing for students to, move from counters to hatch marks when they're first learning addition. But if they have to continue learning it, even into regrouping, etc., I'm impressed that she was able to solve this problem correctly using the hatch marks, but it's a very inefficient method, and it's much easier to make mistakes. And as the skills get harder and harder, she's going to struggle more and more. So making sure that the learners can move on. Yes, they start with the concrete, they start with the pictorial in order to get the concepts down, but then they have to move on to the abstract as they go forward. So in order to do that, some of the things the teachers can do is, using manipulatives when first introducing new concepts. And that doesn't mean you use manipulatives in grades 1 and 2 and then stop. It's as you introduce new concepts. So you might use counters when you're first introducing addition and subtraction, but then when you get to place value and then double digit, and then stop using them and being able to do basic addition, subtraction just with the symbols. But then when you start introducing regrouping, when you're adding, then you want to bring back some manipulatives to help students understand that concept. So you start with the concrete pictorial when you're introducing new concepts, and then explicitly link them, then bridge them to the abstract to ensure learners can move on, and then follow the students to make sure that they're moving on to the abstract as they master skills. And I just have an example here from an observation in math classroom in Madagascar, in the program we looked at there, where a teacher is very explicitly drawing the 3 together, where she shows them seeds and says you have 3 seeds and 3 seeds, and you put together and you have 6. And she will in that lesson, she has the students work with the seeds and then draw pictures themselves. And then she shows the pictorial version and then writes underneath the abstract version to create that explicit link. And of course, she'll come back to this over time as students master the concept and then master the use of abstract symbols within that concept. So those are some of the key things that the research evidence shows are really important in the use of manipulatives to help students understand and master math skills. And then moving on to selecting manipulatives. I have a question for you again. And this question is, which of these representations are best when introducing place value, and why? So if you can put in the chat what you think is the answer. I'll give you a hint. It's not all of the above in this case.
Yeah, I thought you the disclaimer where they're tricking.
I'm not gonna trick you in the same way.
That's where we will have another discussion on assessment as well.
I see a couple voting for these are called base 10 blocks, the ones on the right, A and C. Okay, and a few people, I'm not, okay, so I'm not fully tricking anyone here though, maybe because I told you it's not all. Let's see, I have to get out of the chat in order to forward. Okay, so the one on the left, no question. There is an issue with that, with the B, with the one in the middle, and then we'll talk about C in the next slide here. So when choosing manipulatives, there are 2 main things to be thinking about. The first is, are they conceptually appropriate? Which means, does the manipulative itself really connect directly to the concept and show and show the concept clearly? So that's where we have the problem with my videos blocking. That's where we have the problem with the difference between these first two, right? With the one on the top, and this again is when you're first introducing place value, right? That the one on the top, having the stick being 1, and then explicitly, very clearly, you can take 10 of those sticks to make a 10, and then you have a bundle, which is a 10. That very explicitly shows that concept. And then you can use it then when you're doing regrouping and such. You can actually physically take apart the bundles, and then you have 10 ones. You can take 10 and create the bundles, and then you have a 10. So it's very explicitly directly related to the concept. Whereas in the next one with these tokens, there's no reason, there's no like obvious reason, if you aren't already familiar, that this one token that says 1 and this one would, that 10 of those would be equivalent to these red 10s. It doesn't show the concept explicitly. And so for students, when they're first learning about place value, there's nothing that they can connect to within these manipulatives that is obvious how 10 ones would make a 10. Now, later on, once students have already understand basic place value, maybe using sticks and bundles, or base 10 blocks, we'll get there in a moment. But if students had already built that concept and you're later on, you're working on, maybe you're going up to now thousands and 10,000s, they already have the basic concept of place value, then you might be able to bring in the tokens and have the, and it, you know, also can connect to money and that sort of thing, where you have, then you can explain to the students, okay, we're gonna, you know, we know that 10 ones make a 10. So now we're going to use these tokens to work with it. But when you're really introducing the concept, you would want to stick with the one that's conceptually appropriate. And then the second thing is to be contextually appropriate, that it's accessible, it's something that's feasible given the context. And that's where the base 10 blocks. So the idea here is this also shows it links explicitly to the concept, because one of those blocks, okay, I messed up the size a little bit here, but if you have them in real life, one of those little blocks is the same as the division marks on that 10 stick. And so you could actually stack up 10 of those little blocks and it would be the same as that stick. And so it you know, really does link directly to the concept. However, they're expensive to buy the base 10 blocks. They're expensive. I've seen folks make them with, you know, putting a square on paper and then making sort of the same size on a stick. But that takes a lot of time to make enough for kids to use. And of course, if it's paper, then it might, you know, get messed up very quickly. So the base 10 blocks are great conceptually. Whether or not they're good contextually, it really depends on the context. And so, of course, some things just might not be, there's other things to think about. Like I have seen some teachers use matches. I don't know if that is contextually appropriate anywhere, but thinking about things like that as well is sort of safety, whether, you know, sometimes in the US teachers use food, some places that may not be a good idea. So that second piece is contextually appropriate. And then lastly, really thinking about the manipulatives package. This is, you know, it's always often the case when we're thinking about education instruction, less is more or simple is better. So really having a relatively small selection of materials that can be affordable to buy or easy for teachers to create, that are easy to store and carry and use and manage, and that can be used for multiple skills and topics. And what we've seen again, you know, in the research that we've done is sometimes when teachers are given a large selection of manipulatives, particularly if they don't fully, you know, if they're not fully on top of being able to select easily which ones are appropriate for which skills, sometimes they often they end up actually only using a few of them anyway. and so then you may have wasted funds on that. But then also they sometimes may use the inappropriate like materials for concepts that they're not appropriate for. It's harder for them to master the use of all those different manipulatives. So again, we suggest a relatively small set of materials. And in the guide, we recommend a sort of set of materials that includes 2 or 3, a concrete material, and maybe 2 or 3. You told us to silence our phones, and I, and 2 or 3 pictorial materials across the domains. And some of them, as you can see, some of them might be able to be used in different ways for different topics. Number line is something that's powerful and can be used for a lot of different topics, as is hundreds chart. And then lastly, just I have a summary here of some of the implications for teacher training. So this is all you have to do. You just have to train the teachers on these things. I'll give you a moment to look through them, but basically the teachers need to be able to use them in terms of making sure that the concepts come through clearly and children are able to use them productively, but also there's a lot of management that is involved. So I'll just give a moment. You can read through the items. And sometimes the first one, sometimes some teachers' guides may, tell them what are their appropriate materials to use. They may not always be selecting them themselves, but they, this is still a lot for teachers that we need to make sure teachers are able to do. And then lastly, before I close, I want to talk a little bit about science of teaching. Overall, science of teaching is, this grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that's aimed at improving foundational literacy and numeracy instruction. And we work on compiling evidence. So we have a series of literature reviews and how-to guides, which you can see some of the topics that we have created, these literature reviews and how-to guides at the bottom of the screen. We also have been supporting a number of research studies and then disseminating evidence. And we do also have a technical assistance function. And that's something that you all can take advantage of if you're interested. If there's some topic related to any of these that you feel that you could use some help on, some technical help on, you can get in touch, and we are able to provide technical assistance at no cost to you. And then zeroing in on the math work, a year or two ago, we developed a how-to guide, a broader how-to guide on designing effective numeracy programs. We also have established a mathematics community of practice. We have quarterly webinars and have just started up a members forum through LinkedIn to try to work on really connecting members more and more. And there's the QR code on the right and the website address on the bottom if you want to learn more about the community of practice or see these resources. And some of the upcoming resources that we'll be sharing out are, we are developing a teacher training mini modules on number, operations, and place value, those 3 different modules. They're being piloted currently, and then we're also developing e-learning versions of them. So there's PDF version that you can, print, and then there'll be an e-learning version as well. And we expect to develop some more mini modules in the next year. There are 3 research studies taking place now. We'll be releasing findings, and then this material guidance will come out in the next couple months. So I finished.
Yeah, just on the science of teaching, the communities of practice, like, would you want to share who is in the audience generally, like what kind of cohort is there?
So the community of practice is it runs the gamut. I mean, it's, lovers of math education. So this is, for math, but it's from practitioners to folks that are more sort of implementation managers, to researchers, academic experts. So you have, I mean, in the same group, you'll have folks who are doing interventions and actually would benefit or appreciate TA, and then you have the math experts in the same room who are positioned to potentially be able to give TA. So there's a lot of, and then researchers, so there's a lot of possibility for making connections between those different groups. And it's sort of anybody who is working on math education in particularly in low and middle income countries, though we're not going to bar somebody, who's working in the UK or something like that. But yeah, it's a fairly diverse and growing group. Okay, so whoops, that's for the group. So I will stop sharing, and we have some time for Q&A.
Yeah, we have at least 10 minutes for a good Q&A. Questions could even be about the study or the scale, the study part, or any part of the presentation. So please.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, because I didn't talk in much detail about numeracy at scale. So it could, if you have questions about that or any of the other parts of the presentation.
I think till folks are thinking, I can ask a question. I think first, thank you for sharing this and making it into a classroom kind of a thing. But would love to understand what were what was the depth or the brevity of the study itself, and who were the participants like, and what did you learn from travel through different contexts? One is about learning about mathematics, but one is about learning about the contextual reality in which about the teachers and their capacity building, so on and so forth.
That's a really interesting question. So this is focusing on the numeracy at scale, and just to clarify, the materials guidance, the manipulatives, is for more from a research literature review, kind of a meta-analysis of a number of different studies. But they all really sort of, those things we saw in that larger literature review really connected closely to what we had also seen in numeracy at scale. So yeah, in numeracy, it is very interesting because like the just want to remind me of myself of one thing. The ESMATE program in El Salvador, the program in Jordan, those are much more highly resourced contexts than, for example, Madagascar. Madagascar was, I think, the lowest resourced of the ones we looked in. And, so what you saw in the classroom was really different. In both Jordan and ESMATE, they had some really nice manipulatives that were purchased, whereas in Madagascar, they were making them themselves. So we saw, what would happen with some of these things, these sort of themes in terms of, for example, supporting understanding, the theme was there in every place, but how it looked might slightly differ by context, and some of that I think was the capacity or the capability already of the teacher. So in Jordan, for example, the teacher was really able to really encourage the students to use multiple strategies, and she actually said, great, you're using a different strategy and you're using a different strategy, and she could talk about the different strategies that the students were using to help them all learn from each other, which is a pretty advanced instructional approach. And in Madagascar, we wouldn't see, like, the supporting students' understanding was a bit more sort of as a class having a discussion where she was asking them why questions. Like when they gave an answer, she would say, well, why? How do you know that's the answer? Which is also a really good way to support understanding. It's not quite as sort of complex as having the groups use different strategies and then talking through their strategies and that sort of thing, which is more advanced. But the way in which, certainly what was common was all of the students having plenty of time to practice and to use the manipulatives themselves, whether they were the sticks and bundles that were collected from the grounds, as in Madagascar, or they were store-bought, base 10 blocks or fraction circles, as was the case in Jordan and in El Salvador.
Thank you. We have quite a diverse group over here. I could see, Uganda being represented from a refugee context. Kevin is there, Grace from Building Tomorrow. Then we have Ektara, we have Simple Education. We're very diverse, and Nadeem also from Aga Khan schools. So anyone who has any question to ask or a reflection to your own context, that would be really incredible. Yeah. Ilani has a question about what about digital manipulatives?
Oh, that's a great question. We actually do have a section in the materials guide, about technology. Okay, I can speak to Grace a little bit. So the digital manipulatives, there is a section in the materials guide about technology, and the digital manipulatives, the same thing would go. So now there are digital manipulatives where the student you can actually move on a screen, like something like the base 10 blocks. You could move the counters to count or to form 10, like those kinds of things. So those kinds of digital manipulatives will also definitely will also can serve similar purposes. And you have you can have number lines and things like that. I will say the majority of the apps and software are more are very practice oriented. Most of them don't really aren't meant to support the concepts, or don't do a great job of supporting the concepts, but are more about practicing, which is great. The students need practice as well. But then again, many of them are more practicing the rote, sort of doing addition problem after addition problem using symbols, which again has its place. But understanding what the software does and what it's useful is an important part of that. Just because it's on a computer, on a screen, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the same kind of interactive practice as you would have with actually physically moving sticks and bundles, etc. For just to mention, for literacy, this was focusing on, our research was focusing on math, but of course, literacy, you have, aside from just lots and lots of reading practice, the kinds of things with letter cards and syllable cards. And I've seen these blocks that you can use to kind of generate letters that you can make a word. There's also really useful manipulatives for literacy. Again, I would say less and more. So having some letter cards and syllable cards is a nice base and maybe enough. They're more essential, other than the reading books, which are really, really important in reading. The different kinds of manipulatives to connect to the math concepts, I would say more essential for the math class than their corollary in the reading class. And Eleni, I don't know if I'm saying that right. You said simulations. I didn't know if you could talk more about that.
Yeah, I was trying to add on to what you said about how digital manipulatives, when you use them in terms of moving around, for example, blocks to see how it's working and so on. I was just trying to put a word to that. So those would be simulations and actually using them.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So there could be, for some students, that link may not be as strong, like moving them on the screen may not create for them the same link as physically manipulating them. So it is more like a simulation. But you also then have some simulations, and that reminded me, you also have some simulations of you can also have some kind of simulations where it's almost a game-like atmosphere, but it's getting children to think about problems at the same time. That's some of the newer things that are coming out now that I think are really potentially very interesting, where, in the simulation kind of gaming environment, the student may be like set up like as a shopping market kind of thing, and the student has to solve problems as they're doing their shopping, that kind of thing. So that is a growing thing in the tech environment that has a lot of potential for math learning.
Okay, thank you. Can I add another question? Now that I'm unmuted. So when you're talking about that gaming environment, but also you mentioned it before that some manipulatives are they're always best to be used by learners themselves, but it's also okay to have groups working on them. Is there a limit, or have you, I don't know, have you experienced a limit on what the group should look like, or how many learners should be together in a group to still have enough practice moments or still have enough feeling with what is happening?
Yeah, and you know, I haven't seen specific research on this, but I certainly wouldn't go above 5 or 6 students. But just as important is then, if the teacher's using groups, then the monitoring and making sure that the different students are having an opportunity to practice is key. Because even if you have 3 students, if one of them is basically the only one that actually is ever touching the materials, then it still doesn't do any good for the other students. So, you know, doing things like assigning roles. So today, you know, you're going to be the timekeeper, you're going to be the reporter, you know, that kind of thing, and shifting them from day to day is one way to help make sure over time that everybody gets a chance. And then just monitoring and sort of making sure you don't see the same student always the one that's actually doing the work and the others are just sort of watching, which can often happen. So, I mean, you could, and it depends on, excuse me, how much time you have for practice as well, of course. So you could have a group of 6 if you have plenty of time. If you have 20 minutes of practice time and groups of 6, you can certainly conceivably have each of them, you know, working on one problem in turns or helping each other. So part of it also has to do with the management of the groups.
I think this one is an interesting question about local thing. But Putra, if you would like to, you know, elaborate on that, do you have any innovation or a local solution in mind when you're speaking of it? I think that'll put the question in its track.
Hi, thank you, Ajay. Hi, Wendy. My name is Putra. I'm from Indonesia anyway. So working with the Ministry of Education and Culture related to foundational learning. So I'm curious to know about if you ever been experienced finding like local solutions that works at scale, because sometimes most of the times in our government, they are trying to find local solutions that can like work on the grassroots level. I mean, like, it's really, we need to have some sort of like bottom-up approach instead of like from all the trainings that we provided. So I'm curious to know about such situation, and what are the challenges that you are facing when finding local solutions, the alignment with the concept itself. So yeah, some sort of.
I think the biggest issue when we think about scale is that what solution works well. Like, I guess it's a question of what are you scaling? Because taking, like, what I've seen a lot of really exciting things locally is particularly in the realm of connecting the math to students' everyday lives, which is another that came up actually as one of the themes under reinforcing understanding. Focusing on understanding was one of the approaches we saw in many of the places, was connecting to the students' real life. So that's in a general approach that may look very different in different contexts. So scaling up kind of a principle or an approach is different from then. You wouldn't necessarily do the exact same thing that a teacher did. In fact, I did see like a little store, a teacher had set up a little store in one place. So you wouldn't necessarily exactly what she did in that classroom do in every classroom, but the approach she used to figure out how to connect to their everyday life. The idea of a market or a store probably works in many places, but exactly doing the exact same thing everywhere that worked in that one location, you may run into the same problems that we would run into with, you know, if I came and said, you know, here's my American base 10 blocks, this is what everybody should use. But there are lots of cool things. There was in in Jordan, we saw a teacher that had created this device where it was just for practicing problems, but it was so cool, where it was just like a simple light bulb. And I think maybe it connected to science as well, where if they answered the right question, a light would glow, right? And she just created that herself. And it's something that could be shared with other teachers, but that doesn't necessarily mean it would work in every classroom in Jordan per se. So it's more the approach that she used, that and the way she thought through how to engage students, that might be something that could be shared to other schools and teachers.
That's really profound. We have space for one more question right away before we go into breakouts. I'll share about that, but we have a space for one more, and then we'll come back for debrief another time as well. Yes, Akriti.
I'm not sure if this is the right question to ask, but I'll go ahead and ask it. So my work mostly involves with working with teachers, like coaching teachers for mindsets, for practices. And one thing that I usually get when it's about math and manipulatives is that it takes time, and it's a longer process. So and in those scenarios, I really feel like I do not know how do I handle this, like how do I answer this, and how do I sort of also build conviction for the teachers and build that mindset for the teachers. So what are some things that one might do to ensure that this mindset for mathematics and its connectivity with daily life can actually be communicated to the teachers as well? And even if, like, how do we push for this thinking that even if it's the longer way, maybe, but it's the more sustainable way, right? So,
yeah, that's hard. Well, there's two pieces to that. So when a teacher says it takes more time, I can imagine two sides to that. One is the preparation and management, which is true. That the sort of transition time to get the manipulatives out and share them to the class, or before the class, making sure that you have all the materials ready, that literally takes more time. And some of that, there are things you can do to help the teacher sort of get better at managing the materials. Using the sort of lesson plan checklist, what materials do I need? If they're already storing and keeping the materials well organized, that's going to save time, at the start. And then there are sort of, ways to sort of pass them to the students that can save time. So that's the literal saving time, where you can actually have some kind of tricks and cues for them. The other piece is this mentality of, that you can have this mentality of, like, the point is to get them to solve the problems, which in some ways, just thinking about your class as a whole and not worrying about whether they understand and that all the children are able to do it, the quickest way to, like, get them to be able to walking through a problem is just to stay, to show on the board, okay, this is how you do this kind of problem, and then try to get them to memorize the steps and do the steps. That is, a faster way to get to, oh, the students are working on problems, but you're going to get many, many more students who aren't actually able to solve new problems. And that's the biggest challenge, is that it's when the teachers see that difference that they start to be more and more convinced. So doing a little bit of the time, like if you can encourage them to just try with something very simple, because then they can start to feel, and it's the mindset is the same thing we say with students. We want students to have small successes, right? Because that small success then encourages them. So trying to create that for the teachers as well, and enabling them to have the small success. Let's just use, fraction bars are one of the things I love, because in my teaching methodology classes, when I was a student, I remember seeing other pre-service teachers who suddenly understood fractions for the first time ever in their life when they use these fraction bars. But something like that, where you just do something really simple and just encourage them to try. And then once they see that, like, oh, some of my students who usually don't understand anything actually are understanding this, that can help encourage them to try more.
That's really amazing. Fode has another question, but I would like maybe if that could be added to the breakout, given that that's a question which is asking uh, how can children be encouraged to create their own manipulatives, their own learning materials? And that would be very interesting if you can take up that question in the breakout, because we have 10 organizations over here. So 10 different minds, but 10 different organizations, very, very different contexts. So there's a great opportunity and a segue into going into a breakout, and we'll have 3 groups. We have a lot of learnings. I'll just share the slide deck very simply. So Wendi has mentioned a number of, manipulative pitfalls, such as learners see the teacher model as just a series of steps, learners continue to use concrete or pictorial strategies for basic skills, and so on and so forth. But we would like you to discuss in your group these 2 questions. Which of these pitfalls are familiar to you in your context? Be it for, Ektara's, a few contexts, or our Khan School's multiple space, or Building Tomorrow's so many different, spaces of learning. What ways have you found to overcome them? And has Wendi missed anything? I think you've pointed out a few aspects where we can discuss, but what have you found to be important best practices when using manipulatives? We have 15 minutes. What we'll do is we will enter into a breakout where you will be with 3 or 4 participants, and the questions are written in the chat as well. Introduce yourself, your context. Please ensure each person receives some space to share about their context. And if you can record and document a few things which you can come back, so that we can have a collective time of debrief. If you can give me a thumbs up, then I can share the breakout and open the breakout rooms. Perfect. Let me do that. Just a second. Great. See you in 15 minutes. Great. Wendi, should I assign you to one of the rooms?
I'm just going to refill my water real quick. Perfect. And then I'll come back and join a room.
Perfect. Let everyone join in. Oh, that's amazing. Great. So should we have a number from somebody would like to volunteer? I know we had some wonderful volunteers in each of the groups. So hats off to you all, because we're exactly like the same classroom, right? There is always very difficult and be courageous to be the first one and then to lead the room while you're equally a participant. So it's thank you to who you are in all these 3 rooms. So thank you very much for doing that. And let's have a picture. I haven't yet had a picture, so please don't switch off your camera. Let's count from 5 to 1. So 5, 4, 3. There's a time for everyone to switch on. 2, 1, and yes. Best of the smiles. Great. Thank you. So yeah, let's have this time to debrief and try to really, grasp what came up. Anyone who would like to share? I was hearing one thing about that teachers are not used to or staying in their comfort zone. I think that came up in one of the groups as well. So whoever would like to share what came up in their group and what stayed with you. Putra, look, would you like to share?
I think from our group, Rachel has captured lots of things that I think she's willing to share with all of us.
Yeah, sure, I can. Yeah, so for my group, okay, my name is Rachel Biche from Justice Rising International. Yeah, so for my group, the pitfall that was shared, this one, like for example, if the learner sees the teacher's model as just a series of steps, they can follow the steps without understanding the concept. Onto our past question. And also Putra shared about that on how to overcome that was like going into the lessons, observing how the teachers are teaching, and then from that give them like feedback and also different strategies. For example, working in groups so that teachers can really show examples to these students so that the students can be able like to be engaged fully. And then the second pitfall was on sorry. Yes, if there are not enough materials, teachers only demonstrate or call 1 to 2 learners to demonstrate. And also this one was like backed up by during the lesson observation, because most of us are not teachers, particularly teaching, but more of supporting our teachers. And then so during lessons observation, also making sure that the strategies the teachers are used so that these students can be able like to be engaged fully. And then also on the second question about the best practice, the concept of manipulative concept in mathematics really came out, sharing that it is really important for teachers to use this manipulative so that learners can be able to explore them and how to use them, and not only for teachers to use them, but the whole class. Even if the learners can come, just touch them and then understanding how these manipulatives are used to solve some certain concepts in mathematics. Yes. And then the second one was on like selecting relevant materials. This one was on, it was shared on the teacher training, whereby some teachers find it difficult to select manipulative that can be used in a certain topic. So making sure that they understand that this manipulative goes with this lesson so that it can enhance learning outcomes. Yeah, thank you so much. In case Putra, you have something to add, you can add.
Oh, thank you, Rachel. I think you've covered.
Thank you, Rachel. Very, very insightful. We have 2 other groups. We have the time, so if you would like to share. Akriti, Grace, I'm sure you will be there. Yeah. Great. Thank you very much for sharing those, Akriti. I think that came up a lot, right? Encouraging students to learn. But did the discussion also take place on how students, like for this question on how students can be encouraged to create their own manipulators? I remember something when we had a study tour in Uganda. We went to Building Tomorrow and we saw children. Initially, we are often used to these boards and everyone is writing on the same board, but children started using the ground floor as their own board. And that was really phenomenal because 5 groups were really doing everything. I don't know if that could be used as a manipulative. It would be too broad a category, but in my understanding, that was really like chalk and using the floor as a manipulative to, turn it around. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, AJ. I think it came up in our group and we were discussing how do teachers teach children the way they want to learn. And we thought that could be a way that teachers will change the monotony of the same mechanism for all learners to learn at the same level. And we even spoke to peer learning, that children can even learn from each other as a way to improve their leadership, but also be able to change the whole monotony within a classroom and a classroom setting.
Yeah, really profound. We had one more group, so if they want to share. Ilani, Kevin, Ankam Zimulo.
I can give a summary, but please come in room 2 if you need to. I think one of the main topics that we discussed was teachers with mixed mindsets. One of the biggest pitfalls that we all recognize in our organizations or situations, especially when teachers are biased to use the manipulatives that they used when they were younger during their process, or in the other way, that they were never put into that position and never use things like that when they learn something, so they don't see the relevance of it. And a big part of that is also feeling comfortable in using that, or also teaching with those materials and so on. And there were a few ways to overcome this. I think the idea of multiple representations and just trying out simple things to start with. I think there were also some coaching involved that would focus on the positive sides on using it and starting from there.
Thank you. This is really amazing. Yes, and Kazimulu.
Yeah, so just thanks, Eleni, for sharing that on behalf of our group. We also spoke about it's really challenging for teachers also to differentiate like the use of those manipulatives, especially where in a classroom, different children are at different levels of mastery, right? Like how do you move one child from concrete to pictorial to abstract, or whatever their trajectory of mastery may look like. So yeah, using those manipulatives in a differentiated way and in one classroom space can pose a challenge for our teachers.
That is profound. We generally do separate sessions on remediation and mathematics, but we often, it's very difficult to be in the teacher's place. But these are sessions for us where we give 1.5 hours every month, but they do it in every second and every minute in those 40 minutes. And, no structured teacher guide would be sufficient to fulfill those aspirations and expectations from them. Any parting words, Wendi? I know we have 3-4 minutes. I want to take our feedback as well and a few other things about the future upcoming sessions. But any parting words, Wendi? Thank you so much for being with us and opening this.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to, I really enjoyed dipping into a couple of the rooms and hearing the great reflections. It was super interesting, and some of the discussions about the teacher's mindset I think are really important to points that folks have added. So thank you all for sharing, and I'm really glad I had an opportunity to listen into those conversations.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Wendi. And we wouldn't want you to drop off right away. We have 3 minutes and we'll optimize those 3 minutes with you. We have a poll for you. It's a quick one. It should take a minute or so, but we would really like you to give your feedback. That really helps us. It should be on your screen. The basic 4 questions, but it really helps us understand where we are struggling, where we are strengthening, and how can we take it ahead. If anyone cannot see, please do let us know, but hopefully that should be visible on your screen. Great. We've got some responses. I'm sure others are filling in. Simultaneously, what I can do is I can share what's upcoming, and that gives us an opportunity. So one was certainly the thank you to Dr. Wendi. It was really, really amazing having you. What we're trying to do is continuing to bring evidence and research closer to practitioners. We have different themes planned for, from cognitive psychology to language instruction, to impact of beliefs teachers hold and how best to equip during pre-service training. And we have around remediation and parental. But if you feel there's certain themes and certain research we should bring, please write to us. It'll be really, really helpful. You know how to reach us. It's very simple. My name is Ajay Pinjani, and you can easily email at info@Global Schools Forum. But this is what we are trying to continue before we understand another arc on government partnership as well. So this is where we are going to take it ahead. There is a scale lab as well. The applications are about to close on 12th July. So if you wish to apply, if you've already applied, wish you all the best. If you wish to apply, this is a great opportunity where innovations can be brought to scale. More can be visible on the website of GSF. We have other online events as well. There is an introduction to AI and its use cases, AI 2 events. There's a learning session on child safeguarding. And we also do spotlight sessions of organizations. So if you would like to spotlight, about your organization as well, you can easily reach out to us as well for that. We have many, many tools and resources which we're developing on different fronts. They're all available on the website. So if you have the time, please do look at them and comment. They're all evolving. This is an age where we can evolve further. We're also updating our child safeguarding toolkit. So more to look forward to on that. But thank you for your presence.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, AJ. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Certainly share the presentation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a lovely day.
Thank you.